Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to go to the opening ceremony. I want to introduce our guest speakers, and then I give them a minute to make their statements. The first speaker is Dr. Stephen Jackson, the UN Resident Coordinator, United Nations, Nairobi. The second speaker is Dr. Guled A. Atan, Director of IGAD Climate Prediction Application Center. And the third speaker is Excellency Ambassador Josefa Correia Leonel Sacco, Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, African Union Commission. The fourth speaker is Madam Mami Mizuturi, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And the fifth speaker is Dr. Engineer Karanja Kibicho, CBS Principal Secretary for Interior and Citizen Services, Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to call on Dr. Stephen Jackson to give his remarks. Welcome.
Gordon, thank you very much. Excellencies, friends, disasters are all too real to us living here in Africa. Development gains, the future of development, peace and prosperity are all severely impacted daily and yearly by disasters. And if we don't commit to continuous improvement in our disaster risk management.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to go to the opening ceremony. I want to introduce our guest speakers, and then I give them a minute to make their statements. The first speaker is Dr. Stephen Jackson, the UN Resident Coordinator, United Nations, Nairobi. The second speaker is Dr. Guled A. Atan, Director of IGAD Climate Prediction Application Center. And the third speaker is Excellency Ambassador Josefa Correia Leonel Sacco, Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, African Union Commission. The fourth speaker is Madam Mami Mizuturi, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And the fifth speaker is Dr. Engineer Karanja Kibicho, CBS Principal Secretary for Interior and Citizen Services, Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to call on Dr. Stephen Jackson to give his remarks. Welcome.
Gordon, thank you very much. Excellencies, friends, disasters are all too real to us living here in Africa. Development gains, the future of development, peace and prosperity are all severely impacted daily and yearly by disasters. And if we don't commit to continuous improvement in our disaster risk management, especially in the twin shadows of the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate emergency, we can be certain of one thing: we will attain neither the Sustainable Development Goals nor Agenda 2063. Your Excellency, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk and Reduction, Ms. Mami Mizuturi, Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment of the African Union, Her Excellency Ambassador Josefa Correia Leonel Sacco, Your Excellency and my brother, the Executive Secretary of IGAD, Dr. Guled, and my brother, P.S. Kibicho, here from the Government of Kenya. Excellencies, Ministers, Heads of Delegation, friends, all protocols observed. Good morning from Kenya to all of you who've joined virtually today on the Africa Regional Platform. And as the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Kenya, I'm really honored and pleased to welcome you all to this virtually hosted platform with the spirit and warmth of Kenyan hospitality. Let me offer you, forgive me, PS, to do so before you, a very warm welcome. Karibu tena, as we say in Swahili. And let me thank the government of Kenya for its gracious hosting of this 8th African Regional Platform and the 7th high-level meeting. My congratulations to the African Union and to UNDRR for expertly sponsoring and putting this event together. Friends, today we're meeting in the shadows of a drought emergency that is severely affecting Kenya and the Horn of Africa. Just here in Kenya, 2.5 million people are already affected by deep drought insecurity. And this drought was preceded by multiple shocks. A desert locust outbreak last year, and this year, the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, flooding in 2019 and 20, and some droughts, previous droughts from which we had barely recovered. What we're seeing is evidence that these so-called natural disasters, these hazards, are becoming more complex, more interrelated, more multifaceted, increasingly frequent, and of a more pronounced magnitude. The hazards that we are facing are largely attributable to the climate emergency. The Secretary General's expert panel on climate change has been very clear on this point. But these hazards, these disasters, are also, let's face it, aggravated by the increasing political turbulence in the Horn of Africa and are coupled with weak systems and capacities to manage, mitigate, and respond. And that's what we're here to talk about today. These hazards are multidimensional and they don't conform or limit themselves to our political, social, economic, or cultural boundaries. They spill and spread across them. We are all affected by them. And we cannot afford to leave anyone behind as we collectively plan and undertake actions to improve disaster risk reduction and resilience. Excellencies, friends, Africa still contributes only very marginally to climate change at the global level. Kenya, to give you one example, currently contributes about 1/2000th of global CO2, even though it makes up nearly 1%, 1/100th of the global population. Yet, Africa, as you all know better than I, is on the front lines of the immediate and severe impact of climate change. And Africa will undoubtedly face grave, continued challenges due to climate-related shocks and disaster for decades to come. And this, coupled with instability brought about by conflict and migration, the long-term effects of the COVID pandemic, increasing pressure on natural resources, a large and burgeoning youth population, and rapid rates of urbanization. All of these factors will see us grappling with new, complex, and intense challenges that span this famous humanitarian development nexus. And we have to meet all of that against a backdrop of shrinking global aid and retreating international cooperation that is simply being outpaced by the disasters that we face. Fewer and fewer international resources deployed for humanitarian support in the wake of disasters. That's the simple and sad truth. In the context of Kenya, where I have the honor to serve, that will be even more pronounced because Kenya is, of course, now a proud member of the ranks of the middle-income countries. So this also calls for reflection, repurposed, and re-engineered efforts. It's going to require renewed commitment from African member states, regional blocs, development partners, academia, the private sector, civil society, all stakeholders together, coming together to elevate disaster risk reduction and resilience efforts. That means thinking about innovations and technology, improving governance, improving the policy climate, legislation and strategies, strengthening capacities and partnerships, collaborations within and beyond borders, improving finance, making use of insurance mechanisms to insure against disaster, and of course, improving our economic and environmental resilience. All of this will have to be founded on a solid foundation of multi-hazard early warning and early action systems and mechanisms that work across political and regional boundaries and rely on enhanced regional cooperation. So this is all going to call for really well well-structured collaboration amongst all of us, amongst all stakeholders, under the leadership of the African member states, the regional economic blocs, and the African Union. And I really want to salute IGAD as having led from the front on this in the Horn of Africa region. It will always make sense for us to mitigate and reduce exposure to risk and disasters and to act before disaster hits. Couple this with a no regrets, early warning and early action system, ensuring resilient communities, systems, economies, and societies. And so that's why this Africa Regional Platform and this high-level meeting is so important to me, to the people of Kenya, to the government of Kenya, to the people of this beautiful continent. Because you have the chance now to enact and enliven that continental dialogue and to put flesh on the bones, sincerely, of the much-needed structures. Key amongst the commitments that we all share, of course, is the Sendai framework on DRR and the Africa Programme of Action. And we're here to review, revise, and reaffirm the implementation matrix of the African Programme of Action so that we really hit the Sendai framework goals. And I think doing that will be a real step in the right direction. Here in Kenya, we're working hard together, government, United Nations, partners and people, really to push this forward. It's perhaps a little ironic for me to be saying it when I've emphasized that there are 2.5 million people facing deep food insecurity because of climate-imposed drought in the country right now. But we've actually learned a lot and gained a lot from almost a decade of action under the Ending Droughts Emergency Initiative. The evaluation of that initiative is in. There's a great deal to learn. And had we not had that major multi-stakeholder push over the last decade, far more than 2.5 million Kenyans would be facing deep food insecurity right now. So I really look forward to the deliberations ahead of us with great anticipation. There's a lot riding on this meeting, a lot riding on our shoulders. We really look forward to identifying together new and appropriate ways to interrelate DRR and the fight against climate change, to adapt to it and to mitigate it. We look forward, particularly from a selfish UN point of view, we're right in the middle of developing our new United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for Kenya, and an intense laser-like focus on the promotion of multi-dimensional resilience can, I promise you already, will already be at the heart of that cooperation framework. We look forward to sharing our commitments with you and hearing from you of yours, so that together we realize a strengthened Africa with improved DRR resilience and climate change outcomes. That's critical for all of us. So I really wish you all good, fruitful deliberations over the coming days, because the work ahead of us is so important. So, kazi mzuri, as we say here, good luck with the work. And once again, karibu Kenya. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stephen, for those empowering words to the continent of Africa on DRR and the challenges that they are facing. I don't want to belabor on much on what you said. Allow me to call on Dr. Guled to give his remarks. Dr. Guled.
Thank you, Gordon. Let me acknowledge the presence of the PS of Interior and Citizen Service, Dr. Karanja Kibicho, Interior and Coordination of National Government of Kenya, and Dr. Stephen Jackson, UN Coordinator, and Ms. Uturi, Special Representative for Disaster Risk Reduction, and Ambassador Sako of the African Union. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols are observed. On behalf of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, I will welcome you all to the 8th session of the African Regional Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction. In the IGAD region, disaster risk reduction, disaster risk induced by hydrometeorological events are the most common forms of disasters. Climate related are becoming more intense and frequent due to climate change. Our region in the past few years has seen several extreme climate-induced disasters. Within the past few years, we have seen record droughts and record rainfall in the same location within the region. We are seeing more frequent extremes with higher climate variability that's leaving little time for communities to recover between shocks. As such, the most vulnerable in our population are exposed to severe shocks with little or no time to recover between crises. Disaster risk reduction is a development issue. Disasters are squandering the hard-won development gains of the continent on the last few decades. As we are talking right now, as the previous speaker has said, the region is crippled by a drought that goes from Kenya to Somalia to Ethiopia. And throughout the region, from the last assessment that we have done within this month, there are around 26 million people in need of humanitarian aid. But as IGAD, we have been working on for the last 10 years on the drought disaster initiative to make droughts to never become a humanitarian issue. And now we are on the second phase, and that has helped somehow the region. To reduce disasters calls for appropriate and innovative approaches, including comprehensive risk assessment, robust risk governance mechanism, and more investment in DRR, such as climate-smart livelihood, multi-hazard early warning tied up to early action, sustainable financing in anticipation of disasters, risk transfers, as opposed to emergencies. We need and should address the imbalance in investment and financing from reactive emergencies response to proactive DRR and building the resilience of our communities. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to build the capacity to understand and anticipate risk, capacity to adequately prepare for and respond to disasters. We need to advance our individual and collective capacity in computing and forecasting weather and climate dynamics, and risk assessments and early warning and early actions. This can be achieved through strengthening our institutions to deliver timely and actionable multi-hazard early warnings tied to early actions at all levels, be continental, regional, national, and local. I am pleased to report to you that IGAD has inaugurated 2 weeks ago a climate center facility, ICPAC, here in Nairobi, Kenya. ICPAC hosts an IGAD Disaster Operations Center situation room for multi-hazard early warning system and early action. This center will provide timely regional early warning on impending disasters risks, starting with droughts, floods, migratory pests, and food security dashboard in the first phase. This is a clear commitment from our side to build the disaster risk reduction capacity of the region. In line with the Tunis declaration of the 6th high-level meeting on disaster risk reduction that was held in October 2018, IGAD has revised its regional strategy for disaster risk management, aligned to the priority of the Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Reduction for 2015-2030. A regional framework for integration of climate change and disaster risk management was also put in place, in addition to other sectoral strategies such as on flood risk, gender mainstreaming in disaster risk management and climate change adaptation, and mainstreaming DRR in school curriculum, among others. The priority now for us is to implement the aspirations as enshrined in those regional strategies we developed with the IGAD member states and achieve the disaster risk reduction targets to safeguard lives and protect livelihoods of our people from the adverse effects of climate and disaster risks. Finally, I would like to call on all of the stakeholders to act with sense of urgency to fast-track the implementation of the global commitments and targets enshrined in the Sendai Framework, the Paris Agreement, and the SDGs. Our attention needs to be steered toward translating words into action in affecting continental, regional, and national DRR strategies and plans. I wish you all a successful deliberation, stepping up our commitments during this 8th session of the African Regional Platform as we draft the Declaration for a Resilient and Prosperous Africa. Thank you very much. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guled, on those wonderful sentiments. Some of the issues you rightly highlighted is the DRR being a development issue. The region is currently crippled by drought, and 2.26 million people are exposed to food insecurity. We need to invest in climate smart livelihood. We need to be proactive on issues of DRR as opposed to response. We need to increase our capacities in our institutions. And IGAD, through its constituent of ICPAC, has inaugurated a situational room, a multi-hazard early warning center, which I think is going to go a long way in giving early warnings to our institutions and to our government. Thank you very much, Dr. Atan. Allow me now to call on Her Excellency Ambassador Josefa Correia Leonel Sacco to give her sentiments. Welcome.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. I thank you for the invitation extended to me to attend this meeting. We have had unprecedented events in the past years putting strain on the agricultural sector. Indeed, apart from climate change and conflict that have become recurrent decimal in Africa, COVID-19 disrupted the value chain from input to consumers level access. The resultant impact has been the aggravation of already high rates of hunger, malnutrition, and poverty, strengthening health, food, and nutrition security, and broad socio-economic condition in Africa. Yet, Africa needs to double food production to feed the 2.4 billion people by 2050. From economic history, we know that no region of the world has been able to expand agricultural growth rates and thus tackle hunger without increasing fertilizer use. It is in this regard that in 2006, the African leaders made a declaration in Abuja at the Special Summit on Fertilizer for the African Green Revolution. It was acknowledged that a move towards reducing hunger on the continent must begin by addressing its severely depleted soil. Africa needs to move from the average fertilizers use of about 8 kg of nutrient per hectare of cropland to a target of 50 kg per hectare by 2015. Unfortunately, as we speak today, we are nowhere near that target, which with a continental average fertilizer use below 20 kg of nutrient per hectare. Looking at the fertilizer landscape in Africa, we observe that a lot has happened since 2006 conference. That there has been a strong demand growth since 2008 based on strong GDP growth rate in many African countries over the period for both input and output of agricultural products. We also observe an expansion in fertilizer production facility across the continent, especially in West and North Africa. Despite the progress I have highlighted, considerable challenges remain. Key among which are the following. Fertilizers still remain unaffordable for many African farmers. An important factor in this is the high transport cost of the product in Africa compared to countries from other regions of the world. Fertilizer production level on the continent remain limited, despite the huge potential that exists to increase production volume in line with the soil health reality and plant requirement. Fertilizer business development is still constrained by lack of appropriate credit facilities, and fertilizer are misused or neglected by farmers lacking information and no knowledge on how to use these inputs. Turning brief to land and soil. While it is true that Africa has large amount of untapped agricultural land that could be used to increase production, that is about 60% of arable land, of the total untapped arable land worldwide. It should be noted that much of this land is...
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, apology due to technicalities. We lost Ambassador Josefa, but we will try our best to bring her back. Allow me now to call on Madam Mami Mizuturi, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Welcome, Madam Mizuturi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nuga. Excellency, it is my great honor to welcome you all to the 8th session of the Africa Regional Platform. I would like to convey my deep appreciation for our gracious host, the Government of Kenya, through the Principal Secretary, Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government, Dr. Engineer Karanja Kibicho. I would also like to express my thanks to my dear sister, the African Union Commissioner, Her Excellency Ambassador Josefa Sako, and to the IGAD Director, Dr. Giled Artan, for their contribution and support in the organization of this regional platform, as well as to Dr. Stephen Jackson, the UN Resident Coordinator in Nairobi, Kenya, for your warm welcome. I expect that the outcome of this regional platform will make a significant contribution to the midterm review of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is now underway. It is worth recalling that His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta was present in Sendai, Japan for the 3rd UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in 2015, when this global blueprint for reducing disaster losses was adopted. African states contributed considerably to shaping up the Sendai Framework, particularly its unprecedented focus on health as an integral part of disaster risk management, and thereby helping to ensure that epidemic and pandemic preparedness were included in the final text. This is not surprising, as the region has borne the brunt of many epidemics and developed many innovations for tackling outbreaks of Ebola, malaria, and HIV/AIDS, to mention just a few. With 7 million infections and nearly 175,000 lives lost across the continent, the impact of COVID-19 has already been severe, leading to economic and social disruption, threatening more lives and livelihoods, putting years of human development progress in danger. Given Africa's advocacy for the inclusion of health and disaster risk reduction, it is, I must say, a scandal that the region has been so underserved by the worldwide vaccine rollout to the point where just 5% of the region's population has been vaccinated to date. At the same time, the continent suffers great loss and damage because of global warming and climate change. This was very evident last year when 4.3 million people were displaced across the region, mainly by floods caused by unusually long and intense rainy seasons. And now, as we have heard, Kenya and the Horn of Africa is facing a critical drought situation. Conflict combined with natural hazards further complicates the work of disaster risk reduction in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Conflict, large-scale displacement, drought, flooding, disease outbreaks, and desert locust infestations continue to drive humanitarian needs across the Horn of Africa, where some 20 million people are targeted for humanitarian assistance. The huge shortfall in responding to this humanitarian demand for countries like Ethiopia underlines how important it is to have in place robust national and local strategies for disaster risk reduction, supported by strong risk governance, including well-resourced national disaster management agencies. International cooperation and support for DRR strategies and climate change adaptation depends on proof of a clear vision, good planning, competence, and coordination within and across sectors. I saw this in action when I had the opportunity to visit Kisumu, the third largest city in Kenya 2 years ago. I took a resilience tour with the Kisumu city manager, Doris, and her staff. Good risk governance was evident everywhere in Kisumu, including moving the town dump to a safer location, opening a new bridge to relieve the impact of floods, consultations with slum dwellers, and dredging tributaries of Lake Victoria before the rainy season hit. This is what moving towards disaster risk-informed development for a resilient Africa in a COVID-19 transformed world would look like on the ground. It means building resilience to climate change at the local level and taking account of the broad impacts of extreme weather events driven by poverty, inequality, destructive land use, poorly planned urbanization, and environmental challenges. The UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction stands ready to support such initiatives through the new Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative, developing national disaster loss database to guide policy and risk-informed investment, creating risk profiles, and, as we do here in Kenya, supporting national symposiums on disaster risk reduction. We know much more now about how dynamic the risk landscape in the continent has become with the arrival of the COVID-19 pandemic. A health crisis becomes an economic crisis, which creates poverty, hunger, and even more difficult living conditions for those most at risk of disasters. We know that nothing undermines development like a disaster, and we know that we must break this vicious circle of disaster, respond, recover, and reconstruct, and disaster by putting into effect the program of action for implementing the Sendai framework in Africa. By developing national DRR strategies as agreed in the program of action and integrating DRR in the national adaptation plans, the region can make best use of the resources available to cope with slow onset and also extreme weather events. Through our regional office in Nairobi, UNDRR will continue to ensure there is stronger integration of disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation and cooperation frameworks at the national level in support of the resident coordinator and his team and UN country teams working with national governments. I was very pleased to learn of the progress being made by the government of Kenya to adopt the National Disaster Risk Management Bill, which will act as an example to other countries and help the country to strengthen coordination of DRR activities and to define roles and responsibilities of stakeholders. Good disaster risk governance flows from political commitment, good legislation, and proper DRR institutional arrangement. It also requires an all-of-society approach in taking advantage of the demographic dividend of a large young population by ensuring that youth in Africa are involved in the work of disaster risk reduction. The outcome of this regional platform will contribute to the Africa Common Position to the global platform, which will take place in Indonesia in May next year. And I extend a cordial invitation to you all to attend. I would like to close by thanking you all for attending and participating to the full over the next days, and to repeat that we are very grateful to our gracious host, the government of Kenya, and can only express my very deep regret that circumstances have obliged us to meet virtually. But we do feel the warm welcome of the government of Kenya. Thank you for your attention, and I will look forward for a very productive few days.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to sincerely thank Mami Mizuturi on a very, very in-depth sentiments. He's acknowledged the contributions that the Africa as a continent made to the Sendai framework. She has acknowledged the political commitment that was shown by some of the heads of state, and he highlighted His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta having attended the inauguration of Sendai framework in 2015 in Sendai, Japan. And he's highlighted some of the hazards that the region is facing: the floods, the drought, the disease outbreak, and of course, the unprecedented COVID-19. And she's called on international cooperation to be strengthened in assisting some of this. She's also given some experiences, having visited some of the counties in Kenya. She highlighted having visited Kisumu and witnessed the location of a dump site to reduce the environmental degradation in that town city. And it's highlighted again that a health crisis becomes an economic crisis, and is appreciating that the outcome of the 8th regional platform for DRR and the 7th high-level outcome is going to immensely contribute to the global platform that is going to be held in Indonesia in May 2023. I want to thank you sincerely, Mami Mizuturi. Allow me now to call on Ambassador Josefa Correia Leonel Sacco to continue with a statement. Madam Ambassador, welcome.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. I have the honor to bring you warm greeting of His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, who extends his gratitude to the people and the government of the Republic of Kenya for accepting to host the 8th African Regional Platform for DDR and the high-level ministerial session. Your Excellencies' presence in this meeting, despite COVID-19 situation, is a strong demonstration of your commitment to disaster risk reduction. Without taking much of your time, Excellencies, I wish to highlight the progress we have made in implementing the Tunis Declaration. Following the endorsement of Tunis Declaration, the African Union Commission coordinated the African position to the Global Platform on Disaster Risk Reduction, which was held in Geneva, Switzerland in May 2019. Building on the Tunis Declaration, the African position to the Global Platform highlighted 10 commitments. The African position was endorsed by the African head of delegation to the Global Platform on the 15th May 2019 in Geneva, Switzerland. As you will recall, Your Excellency, the Tunis Declaration highlights a number of actions, including the need to establish continental multi-hazard early warning system, development of inaugural African biannual report on disaster risk reduction, establishment of African Youth Advisory Board on disaster risk reduction, Africa Science and Technology Advisory Group. Your Excellencies, I wish to inform you that progress has been made in the above action. A continental program for multi-hazard early warning system has been developed, supported by Italian government and implemented jointly with UNDRR and CIMA Research Foundation. The program is supporting operations of 3 situation rooms at African Union Commission, IGAD, and ACMAD. There are pilots that need to be downscaled to other regional and national systems. To function effectively, the situation room will need to be backed by a robust international framework and standard operating procedure, as well as data sharing and exchange policies. The institutional framework for multi-hazard early warning system and the early action has been developed and validated by the member states DDR focal point during the multi-hazard early warning conference that was held in Nairobi, Kenya from the 18th to 22nd October 2021. The details framework will be presented to Your Excellencies for further discussion and endorsement. I wish also to report to Your Excellencies that as part of the Tunis Declaration, the Environment Division has now been upgraded into a full-fledged directorate. The directorate is now in a better position to advance the disaster risk reduction agenda. Similarly, as stipulated in the Tunis Declaration, the Disaster Risk Reduction Unit is now institutional in the African Union Commission structure. Other progress made include the establishment of the African Youth Advisory Body and the Africa Science and Technology Advisory Group. The Youth Advisory Board was established to increase engagement of young people on DDR. From its inception in 2019, and despite COVID-19 context, the board reached over 10,000 young people across the continent. In addition, the board, with support from UNESCO, developed an app non-DDR. If you get time later today, kindly check your Google Play to download the app and spread the good news so that we reach a wider African public as much as possible. Similarly, the African Science and Technology Advisory Group, which is comprised of 15 African scientists, is working on a scientific paper, Natural Risk Governance, which will inform policy dialogues on the continent for the coming years. As mentioned earlier, the first biannual report was developed and launched. The report covered period of 2015 and 2018. The findings from the report are striking. Each year, from 2015 to 2018, the continent experienced 98 disasters in average. The 4 years period recorded 68,000 mortality. The economic loss was phenomenal. This was $2 billion. Direct economic losses during the first 2 years, 2015-2016. Surprisingly, the loss in the last 2 and 4 years period was 4 times higher than the first 2 years. Yet, member states acknowledge that the number was grossly underestimated due to limited data collection capacity at the national level. The report further indicated a worrying disaster risk indices. The overall disaster risk index on the continent is increasing. The vulnerability and other exposure are now on the rise. The coping capacity has remained fairly stable during the 4 years period, meaning existing coping capacity are not capable to contain rising vulnerability and exposure. The report further highlighted limited implementation of policy by member states. Only 5% of the African Union 55 countries reported full implementation of policy. By large, most member states are investing less in risk reduction and resilience. Preference is being made to response, which is not at all sustainable. Waiting for a disaster to occur in order to invest will surely roll back the gain that have been made. Yet, as witnessed in recent years, the gap between recovery from one disaster to another is closing. Some communities that witnessed disaster 3 years ago have until now remained in displaced camp as a frequency of disasters events have not allowed them to return back home. Excellencies, there is a need for paradigms shift. If we have to prevent creation of new risk, reduce existing risk, and building resilience, the following actions are urgent. Develop and enforce national policies and legislation that make it mandatory for any investment to take into account disasters and climate risk. That way, we will reduce significantly disasters and ultimately we can be assured of sustainable development. Develop and implement agile multi-hazard early warning system and early early action system and preparedness and response mechanism, including development and implementation of comprehensive and consultative institutional and operational framework for multi-hazard early warning system, as well as operationalization of inter-operational situation room at local, national, sub-regional, and national level. Develop and implement comprehensive recovery program that have clear roadmap that includes recovery from COVID-19 and other disasters. Invest in collection and management of disaster risk data for informed decision making and ensure no one is left behind. I thank you for your kind attention. Muito obrigada pela vossa atenção. Merci beaucoup. Asante sana. Shukran.
Allow me to proceed. There's some technicality there again, and call on our other guest speaker, Dr. Engineer Karanja Kibichu, CBS Principal Secretary for Interior and Citizen Services, Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Gordon. And let me take this opportunity to welcome us to Kenya. Karibuni sana. We've still already done that. And recognize the participation of the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, serving all protocols. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me much pleasure to officially welcome you to this auspicious meeting of the 8th African Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction that is being held here in Nairobi, Kenya. And as a country, we feel honored to have been given this chance to host this event in the schedule of activities of the African region. The Africa Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction is a biennial forum that brings together member states, regional economic communities, development partners, and all other stakeholders to review progress, share experiences, good practices and lessons learned on disaster risk reduction at the regional level. The platform also creates an enabling environment for the building of consensus on the way forward for member states to deliver on their commitments on the Sendai framework and the program of action for its implementation in Africa, thereby contributing to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our virtual deliberations today, I urge all of us to take stock of where we were at the Afro-Arab platform for disaster risk reduction in Tunis in 2010 and what we have achieved in the last 2 years. That should guide us and the kinds of initiatives to work on in the next 2 years. Needless to say, we should be well-grounded in our thoughts, realistic in our proposals, and focused on implementation of our recommendations. Remember that our combined resources in the African region are finite. Finally, I need not remind us that our development programs should be risk-informed. I implore you to think, dream, and live resilience. Let us engender togetherness and consultative approaches in our transboundary disaster risk reduction projects. No doubt it will benefit us immensely if we put in place the modalities for the pooling of resources for tackling DRR challenges. The mainstream gender parity in DRR initiatives. This is the way forward if we are to make effective strides in enhancing the well-being of our people. as a country, we shall continue creating supportive legal framework and resource institutions that deal with disasters in our country, and also participate in the regional disaster intervention. I want to thank you, welcome you to our country, and wish you very well in your deliberations in the next 4 months. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Principal Secretary for Interior and Citizen Services. I want to echo your sentiment and recollecting on the outcome of African Arab Conference in Tunis in 2019. You highlighted the issue on the need to mainstream the gender in DRR and creating, as a country, creating an enabling environment to develop and support legal framework to develop DRR and resiliency in the country. I want to thank you and thank you very much.